Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to share with you something that goes beyond what medicine and science alone can offer. There is a healing power found not only in hospitals and prescriptions, but in the very Word of God. Three special Psalms that have brought comfort, strength, and healing to countless hearts through the ages. These are not just ancient poems. They are lifelines from heaven, reminders that God's healing touches both body and soul in ways doctors cannot explain. The first psalm I want to speak of is Psalm 23. You know it well. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. In this psalm, we find the healing balm of God's presence. When life feels overwhelming, when fear or sickness presses in, this psalm reminds us that God is guiding us beside still waters and leading us in paths of righteousness. It speaks of restoration and peace, a divine assurance that no matter what valley you walk through, God is with you, healing your soul and strengthening your spirit. Next is Psalm 147. This psalm tells us that God heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. It's a promise that God is not distant or indifferent, but intimately involved in the healing of our deepest hurts, whether physical pain or emotional scars. It reveals God's tender care, His power to mend what seems irreparable, and His love that never fails. Finally, Psalm 91 reminds us of God's protection and refuge. It declares that no harm will overtake you and that God's angels watch over you. This psalm gives courage and hope to those facing illness or hardship, reminding us that healing comes under the shadow of the Almighty's wings. My friends, these psalms are God's gift to us, words filled with healing power, comfort, and hope. As you meditate on them, speak them over your life, and trust in God's promises, you will discover a healing that goes beyond what any medicine can do. Let these psalms be your refuge, your strength, and your healing in every season of life. Healing is a profound gift that comes from God, a restoration that touches not only the body, but also the soul. True healing goes beyond the physical symptoms that doctors treat. It is a deep, holistic renewal that brings peace, strength, and wholeness to every part of our being. When we speak of healing in the context of God's Word, we are reminded that He is the great physician, the one who knows our needs intimately and offers restoration in ways that human hands cannot. The healing that God offers is available to all who seek Him with a sincere heart. It begins with faith, a trust that God is able and willing to restore what is broken. This faith does not ignore pain or deny struggle, but it stands firm in the confidence that God's love is greater than any illness or hardship. Healing through God's power often brings peace to the mind and heart, calming fears and worries that can intensify physical suffering. It restores hope where despair once lived and renews strength when the body feels weak. Moreover, God's healing is personal and compassionate. He understands our pain and meets us in our suffering. Psalm after psalm speaks of God's tender care, His ability to bind up wounds and comfort the brokenhearted. This healing is not limited to the physical, but extends to emotional and spiritual wounds as well. God's healing presence brings restoration to relationships, renews joy, and restores purpose in life. When God heals, He does a work that no medicine can fully replicate. It is a healing that transforms us from the inside out, touching the very core of our being and bringing us into a deeper relationship with Him. This divine healing is a powerful reminder that God's grace and mercy are limitless, reaching into every corner of our lives to bring wholeness and peace. Faith is the foundation upon which God's healing rests. It is more than simply believing in the possibility of recovery. Faith is a deep, abiding trust in God's power and goodness, even when circumstances seem bleak. When we face illness, pain, or uncertainty, faith is what enables us to hold on to hope and to open our hearts to the healing touch of the Lord. It is faith that invites God into the midst of our struggles and allows his peace to flood our souls. True faith does not depend on visible evidence or immediate results. Often, healing takes time, and the journey may be filled with challenges and setbacks. Yet, faith keeps us anchored, reminding us that God is sovereign over all things and that his plans are perfect. It is a quiet confidence that, no matter how long the night or how dark the valley, God's light will shine again. This faith is not passive. It calls for active trust, obedience, and a willingness to surrender our fears and doubts to God's care. The Psalms repeatedly encourage us to place our trust in the Lord, who is our refuge and strength. Faith opens the door to experience God's presence in a personal and powerful way. It enables us to receive his promises of healing and restoration, not just as distant words, but as living truths that can change our lives. When faith guides us, we find the courage to face each day with hope, the resilience to endure hardships, and the joy that comes from knowing we are held by a loving God who never abandons his children. Faith in God's healing is a journey, a process of growing deeper in trust and dependence on him. It transforms our perspective, shifting our focus from our limitations to God's limitless power. In this faith, healing begins to take root in our hearts, bringing peace and renewal beyond what medicine alone can provide. Comfort is a divine gift that flows from God's healing presence, reaching into the depths of our hearts when we face pain, loss, or illness. It is a soothing balm for the weary soul, a reassurance that we are not alone in our suffering. When God leads us through difficult times, his comfort becomes a refuge where we can find rest and peace amid life's storms. This comfort is more than a fleeting feeling. It is a lasting sense of God's nearness and care that sustains us day by day. The Psalms beautifully express this comfort, reminding us that God is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. In moments of despair, God's comforting presence offers hope and healing. It is in this divine comfort that we find the strength to endure, the courage to keep moving forward, and the assurance that our pain is seen and valued by a loving Father. Comfort does not always mean the absence of hardship, but the presence of God's peace within it. God's comfort also heals the emotional wounds that illness or suffering can cause. Sometimes the hardest pain to bear is not physical, but the loneliness, fear, or grief that comes alongside. God's comfort reaches into these places, offering his love and peace to mend what is broken inside. It reminds us that healing is holistic, touching body, mind, and spirit alike. This comfort leads us into deeper trust and dependence on God. As we receive his soothing presence, we learn to rest in his care and let go of our anxieties. Comfort encourages us to lean on God's promises and to remember that he is always working for our good. In God's comfort, healing begins, not only in the body but in the heart and soul, bringing a peace that surpasses understanding. Restoration is at the heart of God's healing work, a powerful process through which he brings broken lives back to wholeness. When life has left us wounded, whether through illness, loss, or hardship, God's restoration breathes new life into what was once shattered. It is a divine renewal that mends what is broken, rebuilds what has fallen apart, and refreshes our spirit with hope and purpose. This restoration is not merely physical. It touches every area of our being, including our emotions, relationships, and faith. God's word reveals that he restores the soul and renews strength for those who seek him. This restoration is a gentle yet mighty act of love, showing that no matter how deep the hurt or how long the struggle, God's grace is sufficient to make us whole again. When God leads, he invites us into this healing process, encouraging us to trust in his power to restore what seems beyond repair. The restoration God offers also brings freedom from past pain and regret. It lifts the weight of guilt and sorrow and replaces it with forgiveness, peace, and a fresh start. This transformative work enables us to move forward with confidence, knowing that God is making all things new. Our scars may remain as reminders of our journey, but they no longer define us. Instead, they testify to God's faithfulness and His ability to redeem every part of our lives. In the midst of restoration, God's presence brings comfort and strength, empowering us to face the future with hope. This process often requires patience and perseverance, as restoration can take time. Yet, as we walk with God, we experience His continual work in our lives, renewing our hearts, restoring our joy, and giving us the courage to embrace the new life He has prepared. Restoration is the promise that with God's leading, healing is not only possible, but certain. Protection is a powerful promise that comes when God leads you through the valleys of life. It is a divine shield that guards your body, mind, and spirit from harm and danger, even when threats seem overwhelming or invisible. God's protection is not just about avoiding trouble, but about being kept safe in the midst of trials, knowing that His presence surrounds you like a fortress. This protection brings peace that calms the fears and anxieties that often accompany illness or hardship. The Psalms speak boldly about God's protective care, describing Him as a refuge and fortress where we find safety. When we face uncertainty, God's protection is the assurance that no weapon formed against us will ultimately succeed. It is the confidence that God's angels watch over us, keeping us from harm and guiding our steps. This protection is both physical and spiritual, guarding our hearts from despair and our bodies from danger. God's protection also empowers us to face challenges with courage. Knowing that the Almighty is our defender gives us strength to stand firm even when the path is difficult. It enables us to trust without fear, to move forward boldly, and to rest in the security of His care. This divine protection is not passive. It invites us to actively rely on God, to call upon Him in times of trouble, and to walk faithfully in His ways. Moreover, God's protection reminds us that we are never alone. His presence is a constant shield, a shelter in every storm. This knowledge frees us from the bondage of fear and fills us with hope and confidence. When God leads, His protection is a powerful reality, keeping us safe, strengthening us, and guiding us toward healing and wholeness. Strength is a vital gift that God provides when He leads us through times of trial and healing. It is not merely physical power, but a deep inner resilience that enables us to endure hardships, face challenges, and keep moving forward when our own energy fails. This strength comes from the Lord, who is our refuge and source of hope. When we rely on Him, we find the courage to persevere, the endurance to withstand pain, and the peace that sustains us in the darkest moments. The Scriptures remind us that God's strength is made perfect in our weakness. This means that even when we feel exhausted, overwhelmed, or broken, God's power is working through us to carry us beyond our limits. It is a strength that does not come from our own will or ability, but is poured out by God's grace. When we surrender to His leading, He renews our spirit and lifts us up, giving us the energy to face each day with confidence and hope. Strength from God also empowers us to overcome fear and despair. When illness or hardship threatens to rob us of peace, God's strength steadies our hearts and calms our minds. It gives us the resolve to trust Him, even when the outcome is uncertain. This divine strength helps us to hold on to faith, to remain steadfast in prayer, and to continue living with purpose despite difficulties. Moreover, God's strength is a source of encouragement not only for ourselves, but for those around us. When we are strengthened by Him, we become beacons of hope to others who are struggling. We show the world that true strength is found in dependence on God, and that with Him, no obstacle is too great. In God's strength, healing and restoration are not only possible, they become a reality that transforms our lives. Trust is the foundation upon which God's healing work is built. When God leads us, He invites us to place our confidence fully in Him, to lean not on our own understanding, but on His unfailing wisdom and love. Trust is not always easy, especially when we face uncertainty, pain, or the unknown. Yet it is through trusting God that we find peace, courage, and the assurance that He is in control of every situation. Trust means surrendering our fears and doubts, and believing that God's plans for us are good, even when we can't see the whole picture. It is a daily choice to believe that God is working all things together for our good, that every challenge and hardship has a purpose in His perfect design. When we trust God, we acknowledge that He knows what is best and that His timing is always right. This trust frees us from the burden of trying to control outcomes and allows us to rest in His care. The Psalms often express this trust in God's steadfast love and faithfulness. They remind us that God is a refuge and strength, a help always near in times of trouble. Trust deepens our relationship with God, turning our hearts toward Him in prayer and dependence. It helps us to listen for His voice, follow His guidance, and obey His leading even when the way is unclear. Trust also sustains us through the healing journey. There may be setbacks or delays, but trust keeps us anchored in hope and faith. It strengthens us to persevere and to keep our eyes fixed on God's promises. In trusting God, we experience His peace that surpasses all understanding, a peace that guards our hearts and minds as He leads us toward wholeness and healing. Hope is a powerful and sustaining force that emerges when God leads you through trials and healing. It is more than mere optimism. It is a confident expectation rooted in the character and promises of God. Hope gives us the strength to face the darkest moments with the assurance that God's love and power are at work, even when we cannot yet see the outcome. When we hold on to hope, we embrace the truth that God's plans for us are good, filled with a future and a purpose. Hope does not deny the reality of suffering or pain, but it refuses to be overcome by them. Instead, it looks beyond present difficulties to the promise of restoration and renewal that God offers. The Psalms often reflect this hope, lifting our eyes to the Lord as our source of deliverance and joy. They remind us that God's steadfast love never fails, and His faithfulness endures forever. This unshakable hope anchors our souls and keeps us from despair. When God leads, hope fuels perseverance. It encourages us to keep trusting, keep praying, and keep moving forward even when the way is uncertain. Hope empowers us to face each day with courage, knowing that God is working behind the scenes for our good. It transforms our outlook, turning fear into faith and weakness into strength. Hope also impacts those around us. As we hold on to God's promises, our hope becomes a testimony to others, a light that shines in a dark world. It inspires those who are struggling to believe in God's power to heal and restore. In hope, we find a new beginning, a reason to keep believing, keep hoping, and keep trusting in the God who never abandons His children. Peace is a profound blessing that God brings when He leads us through times of sickness, struggle, or uncertainty. This peace is not merely the absence of trouble, but a deep, unshakable calm that settles in the heart and mind. It is the peace that surpasses all understanding, a gift from God that guards our thoughts and emotions even when the world around us seems chaotic. When God leads, His peace becomes a refuge, a shelter from fear and anxiety. The Scriptures teach us that God's peace is available to all who trust in Him. It flows from the assurance that God is in control, that He holds our lives in His hands and is working all things for our good. This peace quiets the restless mind and soothes the troubled soul. It breaks through the noise of worry and doubt, reminding us that we are not alone and that God's presence surrounds us continually. God's peace also empowers us to face difficulties with courage and confidence. When fear threatens to overwhelm us, peace acts as a shield, calming our hearts and helping us to focus on God's promises rather than our problem. It strengthens our faith and enables us to rest in God's care, knowing that He will never leave us or forsake us. Moreover, this peace is a witness to others. When we carry God's peace within us, it shines as a light to those around us, showing them the reality of God's love and faithfulness. In times of healing and restoration, God's peace transforms our perspective, allowing us to live with gratitude and hope. It is a constant reminder that no matter what happens, God's presence brings a peace that the world cannot give or take away. Presence is the most comforting and powerful reality we experience when God leads us through healing. It is not just a distant promise, but a tangible, living experience of God's nearness in every moment of our lives. When we face trials, pain, or uncertainty, the awareness of God's presence becomes a source of strength and peace that carries us through. This presence is constant, never leaving us, never abandoning us, always ready to hold us close. The Psalms often declare that God is with us, that He will never forsake His children. This presence brings a deep sense of security, a shelter from the storms of life. Knowing that God is near allows us to face each challenge with confidence because we are not alone. God's presence reassures us that even in the darkest valleys, He is walking beside us, guiding us, and providing the healing we need. God's presence also changes the way we experience pain and suffering. It transforms loneliness into companionship, fear into courage, and despair into hope. When we feel weak, His presence strengthens us. When we are weary, He gives us rest. This presence speaks directly to our hearts, whispering words of comfort, encouragement, and love that renew our spirit. Moreover, God's presence invites us into a deeper relationship with Him. As we become more aware of His nearness, we learn to trust Him more fully and to listen more carefully to His voice. This intimate connection brings peace that surpasses understanding and joy that remains even in the midst of trials. God's presence is a constant reminder that His healing power is not distant or inaccessible, but close, personal, and ever ready to transform our lives.